morning, everyone, and welcome to our backyard. It is already the end of August, and that means it is time for my monthly backyard garden tour. And so I like to start out on my back concrete patio and just pan the backyard just to get a view of what it looks like at the beginning of the tour. And then I like to start the tour in a different spot each time. And for August, I'd like to start with my vining plants that grow vertical. And my mandevilla is flowering on the backside here. And I think that's partly because it's getting a little bit of shade. As I have mentioned in past videos, we have had a pretty brutally hot summer. And even though our summers are typically hot, they're typically in the 90s. And this summer we've historically had a very hot summer to where we've set records time and again of being over 100. Yesterday it was 108, and the feels like was in the 100 and teens. It's just been tough on plants and animals. And even though I have a lot of tropicals, like you see here in the vines I'm going to be showing you, they're called tropicals because they thrive in the tropics areas. And in the tropics, the temperatures are not in the 110s. They are in the 80s and 90s, and that's their ideal temperature. And so even though my tropicals aren't dying, some of them are behaving differently than they have in past years. And where I see that the most is in my tropical annual vine here, which is the cardinal climber. And by this time of year, this vine is usually very lush. And what I mean by lush is it has nice, large, feathery green leaves. And by the end of August, it's starting to flower. Ours has flowered all summer long. Not a lot, but flowers here and there, which is unusual for us. And it is not lush. You can see the vines are growing. It's healthy. I love the offshoots. This is what it does this time of year. It has these offshoot vines that it grows, and it should start prolifically flowering. It's just not a lush vine. Its stalks are doing great. They're nice and thick. We ensure that it gets watered really well. And that isn't an issue. What's been an issue is our very difficult summer. I'm going to pan the 5 panels here of our cardinal climber, and then I'm going to come over to the side. And this also helps me because I can see from year to year what things look like. So I certainly hope it starts to flower and we get the flower production that we're expecting for hummingbird migration. In the center, I have a Kufia and a Russellia. And the Russellia is called a firecracker plant. And I'm going to get a little closer. This plant has been flowering for us all summer long. And it has these long blooms, tube-shaped, which are favorites of hummingbirds. And in particular, we have had a female hummingbird that's stayed with us all summer long, and She absolutely loves these flowers. This is her favorite because she seems like she's always coming here first. And it's fun to watch her because she certainly has a preference for this. And it's nice and big this year. This is the second year that we've had the Roselia, and it's been blooming beautifully. So now when I look at our cardinal climber and continue on, this we call our trellis bed. So I'm going to go over into our trellis bed area. And probably the second type of flower that our hummingbird has been loving on is our flamacanthus. And right now you can see one of our native bees enjoying the flamacanthus. This is probably her second. She's here all the time, every day. And it's being overshadowed somewhat, well, quite a bit by my Mexican sunflower, but it is flowering really nicely along my trellis bed. And what I have growing up high is my gorgeous passion vine. And I have two different types here I've mentioned in the past. And this type is a native, which is called a cottonleaf passion vine. And the reason it's called a cottonleaf is because it's hairy, a little bit fuzzy. It feels fuzzy, and this is native to Texas. And interspersed with this is my vine called Incense, which is a cross between the native maypop, and I always forget the other passion vine that it's crossed with. But this vine produces fruit. The squirrels love. And incense flowers, sorry about that, a really pretty purple. This is going to open today. A really pretty purple, gorgeous flower. And so this happens to be the host plant to the Gulf fritillary butterfly. And I have incense that is started on this side of the trellis. And I have the cottonleaf, which is started on the opposite side. And the cottonleaf grows, it grows vertically too, but it is pretty much a major horizontal grower. It is growing the complete length of this trellis. But I'm going to back up a little here. And as I have mentioned in past videos, I will not have my Mexican sunflower or Tithonia in this bed. It's just too tall. You know, it's probably, golly, 9 feet tall by now down there on the end. And it is a very much wonderful for the butterflies. But I do have a new spot picked out for it for next year. Okay, I'm going to come onto our center bed, which is growing nice and lush. And this we call our tree bed because we used to have a maple tree planted here. So I'm going to get in a little closer. Got a lot of bee activity this morning. So on the end here, I have a David Verdi Kufia plant, and this is its second year. And right off from that, I have Salvia leucantha, or Mexican bush sage. This salvia really heavily bloomed in the spring, and then it took a break in the summer, and now it's starting to bloom again. And as I move to my right, I have a gorgeous mounding lantana. It's taken a little bit of a break here on flowering. This one happens to be a rose that flowers. And as I have mentioned in the past, I really like this lantana because it mounds. So I had rose over on the side, and on the end here I have the mounding lantana, which is red. And I just love the mounding habit of this lantana. It doesn't sprawl all over the place, and it just has a beautiful mounding habit. This is probably the only lantana that I will ever have anymore. I do not prefer the sprawling lantana. And then in between, I have the native Greg's Mist flower. And this has been a real nice bloomer all summer long. It's a favorite of monarch butterflies and also queen butterflies. And one of the commenters noted in the comment section on one of my videos that they have this mist flower, which is native to Texas, and it's taken over one of the garden beds. And this was one plant, and it has taken over the front part of this bed. And I have been cutting it back because I don't like it going off the side of the bricks, but it's flowering so nicely now. And you know what's interesting is I used to not have a lot of queen butterflies in the yard. I would have a few in the summer, but regularly I'm finding queen butterflies on this. It's one of their favorite flowers for nectar flowers, and that's so interesting that I only have this one area, and the queens are finding it and coming. So on the back side of the tree bed, I have two salvia, the Amante, which you see here, which has the beautiful hot pink bloom, and then I have the Amistad, which is the purple. And this has been struggling for me in the heat this year, and I've noticed most of my Garanitica plants, that is true. So I do have some other Garanitica salvias, which this is a hybrid of one, and I don't know if it's the extreme heat or it's the fact that I did not cut them back, but they've not been happy. So now as I take a look from over here on my tree bed and look closer to the fence, I have my porter weeds, which are here, and they have been flushing out pretty nicely, but today they're not heavily in bloom. And then I have my little 4x4 bed. I have really enjoyed my little 4x4 bed here. It is in full sun all day long. It gets beat on in the full sun with the heat that we've had. But all in all, I've been very happy with it. I did have a storm and wind, and it did somewhat bring my Cheyenne Spirit coneflower and had it lean over to the side quite a bit. But I'm getting new blooms, and I'm happy. I'm happy with my John Fanick phlox, my pentas, my gorgeous Rose of Sharon. I'm having to go in and out. My neighbor's watering, and she's overspraying into my yard, and it's pelting me with water here, so sorry about that. I'm scooting back in and out. But I've been happy with this little bed. It's been performing nicely, even in this full, hot searing heat and sun. And then as I look into my south bed, this is in my little corner that just bakes and bakes. It's so hot, but it's doing wonderfully. In particular, look at this giant milkweed. They're doing splendidly. As I look on, it's like, oh, love it. I'm going to come over to the side here. And this is my blue porterweed. This has been a consistent performer all summer long. And what's interesting about a porterweed is even though it only blooms, its bloom habit is different because it has this long bloom stalk and it only flowers in a segment, a small segment of that bloom stalk each day. But these flowers, even though they are small, they replenish with nectar. And so all day long, you will have bees that are on porterweed. And so this one has loved its life here. The other comment back here, and I've got quite a few different plants. I've got a butterfly bush. Down here I have a kufia. I've got my gorgeous Mexican bird of paradise. But interestingly, I have a native salvia. And this salvia is not my favorite salvia at all, but it is covered in native bees all day long. And when I come into this south bed, there's a lot of flowers to choose from. And from bees to wasps to all the different natives, they love this salvia. It has more activity than a lot of flowers. Okay, now I'm going to go in the back. And in the back, I have my beloved firebush. And firebush, my middle firebush, is covered in blooms. And once it finishes blooming, let me get a little closer here, it produces berries that the wildlife loves. And so the bees and hummingbirds are back here. I also have Mexican sunflower back here. But my main plants in the back here are 3 very beautiful and large now fire bushes that have grown from the ground because they froze above ground during our last winter. So this particular fire bush has a very small leaf, but my fire bush right next to it has a much larger leaf. And this larger leaf creates larger blooms. But it doesn't create as many blooms. So there aren't as many bloom heads on this larger leafed fire bush as there are on my center. That center fire bush is just covered. Love it. But my larger fire bush does create larger berries. So the larger leafed, I should say, fire bush does create larger berries for the birds. And as I come out back to the front, my Mexican bird of paradise. Its new bloom is starting to flower. And this one still has a lot of center bloom buds that will be flowering. As I was on a walk yesterday in our neighborhood, one of our neighbors had a hedge of this, and it was just gorgeous. Okay, now as I look over, another vining plant is the native coral honeysuckle. And I've got it in pots because of drainage back here. And then I also have it planted in the ground along the east side. And this plant, such a beautiful performer. Native to East Texas. And I love all the wildlife, bugs, just all the benefits of this plant. There's its berries. They get red. So these are immature berries at the moment. And hopefully it will start to flower. Again, it flowered prolifically in the spring, and then it flowers little by little throughout the summer. And hopefully in the fall here, I'll get a nice another flush of flowers. And then another native I have along this eastern side is my Turk's cap. And my Turk's cap is flowering. They do have these, they're like mini hibiscus that just don't open. Hummingbirds come down and can stick their beaks in the center. Bees just come down to where the bloom meets the petiole and just get the nectar from there. But I've been disappointed in my Turk's cap. Look at how it has struggled, and it's only in the morning sun. It certainly has not liked its summer here. And I don't blame it. There's not a lot of things that have enjoyed our excessive heat and the heat domes that have been over Texas this year. And as I continue on, I have a large, wide coral porterweed. And then in the back, I have a planter. And I have mentioned this one before. This is Dragon's Breath Celosia. And it is, with one fairly small nursery plant, has just gorgeously grown into this planter. Its bloom is faded. It was a beautiful, striking red color. But I love how it has spread. Okay, and as I continue on, this is our very small concrete patio. And I have pulled out my hummingbird bird bath. And this bird bath is designed to attract hummingbirds, and the hummingbirds are supposed to come and they like to bathe on the top here because they can't bathe in a traditional bird bath because they're such small birds. I've seen my other birds land on the lip and drink the water, but I haven't seen a hummingbird bathe in this yet, and this is my second season of having this. But I did bring it out because hummingbird migration should be, and well, it is starting because we have started to see our male ruby-throated hummingbirds fly through. This area gets morning sun. You can see the tip of the morning sun coming. And then it gets sun until about 2:30 in the afternoon. And close to 3, then it's done. So it gets protected from the horrible sun and heat, or I should say the late afternoon sun. It gets protected from. It does get the searing noon and 1 o'clock sun beating down on it. And as you notice, the Mystic Spire Salvia is, ooh, I like this. And the 3 pots of tropical hibiscus are doing well. They haven't, sometimes the blooms I'll have is like maybe 6 to 8 blooms at a time. Nothing like I've had in the past. And these are all, these 2 are new plants, and they've definitely have grown very nice, just beautifully. This plant was saved from our winter freeze, my pink, and it's also grown nicely. And they do flower. I just don't think they enjoy and have thrived in the 108 degrees. Okay, so now I'm going to go over, this is where I started with my vining plants, and I went this way. And now I'm over to what we call the shade bed and the north bed. So let me go over to the shade bed. Our shade bed has been a refuge for a lot of animals, if you will, during this heat and scorching summer. And because of that, I've lost some things in my planters. Specifically, I've mentioned the squirrels absolutely love my caladium pots. And so once they dig and uproot and dig out the roots, so then they kill the plant, then they stop going in the pot and they move on to the next one. And this one got all dug up also, and so it's on its deathbed. So my 2 favorite caladium, or that I did like in the spring, my pots, the squirrels have killed, and I really don't like that. I've tried to put rocks by my coleus here. They're completely dug up around the root ball of this and dug out the roots, and so then of course the coleus struggles. And then they moved on to my favorite caladium, and so I put rocks in here and they dig, and it's, there's nothing you can do. They're hot. These squirrels are trying to survive also, but I don't know what it is in particular about caladiums. Only thing I can figure is these stems are so nice and soft, and then of course they're watered, and so it's cooler in here. And I was surprised they jumped up onto this one last because it is a much taller pot. But this weekend, when we had again 108 degrees here south of Houston, they dug in this pot. So I fully expect, I tried to put things back together and cover the roots, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose this one too. So squirrels right now are not my favorite thing in the garden because they're doing so much damage, and that's just because they're trying to stay, cool also. But the other thing too, and I've looked this up on the internet, why do squirrels dig in planters, and why do they dig around plants and dig up the roots? And this is what squirrels do. And it's frustrating because they kill plants here. So I'm in the back of my shade bed, and I just want to pan this way because, as you'll notice, I now am letting my coleus flower. Hummingbirds, bees, bugs love these tiny little flowers. And tiny they are. These seem so insignificant. But pollinators really do enjoy the coleus flowers. And so now that I'm letting the coleus flower, they're getting leggy and they're not as pretty. But I'm going to continue to let them flower because they are such a strong draw to the pollinators. So as I continue looking out from the back of my shade bed here, I do want to point out my Salvia madrensis, which I love this plant. And it does have a long bloom stalk on it, which I'm going to show you here. See how long that is? And it just continues to grow. And it blooms a beautiful yellow bloom. I've got a couple of these stalks. It's a little bit early for it to start blooming, but I'm going to come down and I'm going to show the couple of plants that I had planted back here. These are the two that I was able to get this summer from my favorite nursery and to replace the one that I lost in the winter. And they're growing wonderfully also. So this starts to shine. I love the foliage all summer long. I love the size of the foliage. It's very unique. Love the color. But it starts its show with blooming in the fall. And then as I come around to the other side of the north bed, I'm going to pan just a little bit. You can see the makeup of the bed has changed quite a bit because I'm letting the coleus flower now. It does look unruly and not as pretty, so I'm going to have to put up with that now for the rest of the season. And then on this north side, I have my white veined Dutchman's pipe. And this is a host plant to my pipevine swallowtail. And in the summertime, I was able to get some more plants at my favorite nursery. And I'm so happy. But I haven't planted them in the ground because it's just been, I don't want to shock them. It's just the summer here has been terrible. So I'm hoping in a month or so, I'm going to, hopefully less, but I don't see any change on the horizon. But I'm going to come down and show you another reason why I haven't planted them in the ground. And again, this is the squirrels coming in and digging. And I see this morning. So if I plant these, the squirrels are just going to dig up the new plants and I'm going to lose them. And so this is just concerning all the damage that's happening. And like I said, I understand. They've killed another couple plants on this end. My gorgeous large coleus. And then another caladium. They love my yard, and they come in with bringing in other things. I don't know what this flower / seed pod is. And they bring them into the yard. And this used to be huge. And they dug through it, dug under it, completely rooted, exposed roots, and killed it. And so now they don't go to it anymore. Imagine that. I kill something and so I won't go to it. I'll just move on to the next the next plant to kill. Grrr. Gardeners don't appreciate that, do we? And finally, the north bed. And the north bed has struggled. It is in our raised bed that is the shortest raised bed, and it has the most clay in the soil. But I'm going to start by talking about the pots first. And again, our giant milkweed is gorgeous. Love it. And then next to it, potted, I have a porterweed. And this is kind of a lilac colored, purple lilac colored porterweed. And I'm looking and I don't see any blooms. It flushed out lots of blooms on Friday, but it doesn't have today. But I replaced a Miss Violet butterfly bush that was struggling. And in this same location, I have a porterweed that just loves its life. And on the end, I have a host plant, which is a cassia or senna plant. And it has not appreciated the extreme temperatures and the extreme heat that we've had. But it's still alive. It just hasn't started blooming, and typically it blooms by now. So what isn't struggling on this north end? Well, this is a Mystic Spire salvia that flopped over because of wind, and it's blooming beautifully. And then I have a tropical milkweed, and I have this for the flowers, not for caterpillars. We don't have any caterpillars right now, but in particular, my swallowtail butterflies love these blooms. Milkweed blooms are always such a hit with butterflies. And of course, if you have milkweed, you're also going to have aphids. And I'll spray them off. But if I know I've got milkweeds, I'm going to have aphids. And the gorgeous fennel that I had all along in this north bed has bolted. It's trying to flower, but it's also not doing well. I have found what plants do not like their lives in full sun during our awful heat. I do have a pot of Flamacanthus, small pot here, that I will be planting over with the other Flamacanthuses once this brutal heat dome subsides. And then finally I want to share the blue butterfly clerodendron. I showed this in a recent video. And it is not suffering because of the heat. It loves its life at the moment. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you watching the channel. For all of you in Florida with that hurricane that's coming, I certainly hope that it doesn't get to be to a high hurricane status, and I hope it doesn't do damage. So I'm thinking of you, my Florida friends. And all of you in this heat dome, I'm also thinking of you, especially in Texas. Stay safe and hydrated and as cool as you can. But I really appreciate you joining me this morning on my August garden tour. I have to be thankful that I have plants that are alive and they're green and they're flowering and the pollinators are over them. I mean, all over them. So I'm very thankful for that. You might hear the disappointment in my voice as I'm speaking because it is a different year and plants are struggling, but I am very thankful because I know things could be worse and I don't want them to be. So thanks for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful day and I hope to see you again.